Hey everybody, welcome to Rust Belt Startup. I'm your host, Ryan Miller. If you're new here, this is a podcast full of long-form conversations, typically with artists, entrepreneurs, educators, people that are living unconventional lives in unconventional locations. And today is a conversation that I get to have with a friend, a mentor, a colleague, Mr. David Casullo. He is the CEO and founder of Denali Partners, and they are an amazing, renowned executive leadership development company. David is the author of the book Leading the High Energy Culture, and he is a relentless champion of building community and supporting many of the things that make upstate New York a great place to live and work. So in this conversation, we're going to talk about what makes a great leader, but we're also going to talk about how do you identify the unique gifts and talents of all of the individuals that make up an organization. How do you identify those and harness those, bolt those on to the mission of the organization to supercharge it? We get into his time as the head of HR at Raymore & Flanigan and how he transformed the culture to align people to create delight in a business where we typically don't think about that as a core mission. We'll get into some of the tools that he uses when he's developing and working with leaders and executives. And I've had the great privilege of going through this process with David too. And I can tell you it's very illuminating. And there's some things that we're going to talk about that you can start to apply in your own life to hopefully become one of the best versions of yourself that you can. And we'll get into, once you know who you are and what's important to you, 2 key ingredients of being an effective leader, or just an effective human, honestly. How do you harness those things and then go for it? What can you do to get started? All right, Dave. So thanks for taking time and coming down. And we've done this several times, but never on mic, where I feel like every time I get to interact with you, I learn something. And I'm excited that you're doing a podcast because you got a great voice for radio, first of all. You got that baritone, and it's really good. Let's, instead of going right back and starting with the origin story, which I do want to get to, let's just start by acknowledging that you're in the business of building people. You're in the business of building leaders and builders. What do you think makes a good leader? Let's just start there.
Upbuilding is definitely my mission, for sure. And I tell anybody who's interested in how I came to be impassioned to do that however it happened, I've always been around leaders who've connected deeply with me and somehow moved me. Leadership is about somehow connecting deeply with one or more people, expressing in some meaningful way something that moves them to act. So you're speaking to not only their head, but fewer leaders can speak to another human being's heart. And I find that that's really a big element of leadership that is a differentiator for those that, connect deeply. The last thing is this ability to galvanize people in a way that moves their hands, makes them actively want to support something with their own talents and abilities, and to participate in some way that is meaningful to them. A good leader is someone who is very, very clear on what matters to them, and I think about that in 3 areas: personally, professionally, and aspirationally. What needs doing in the world. Not to blow smoke, but one of the reasons I've been drawn to you is, as a younger leader, you seem to have a very clear, thoughtful vision of what matters to you, and you strive to make a difference in those areas. That's really important. Secondly is, people who have an awareness of their unique blessings, and they work hard to build them into strengths, and they're aware that they also have gap areas that people who have strengths in those gap areas can collaborate and contribute to the success of the direction that they're envisioning needs to happen. And then lastly, I think this is more recent, Ryan, than, even, most of what I've learned over the course of my career about leadership. I think there's a spiritual component. And obviously everyone has their own beliefs and their right to believe whatever they believe. I am a Christian, and I believe that, there is a component that is, I'll call it the universe, that when you're on the right path, when you've decided what's important and you recognize that your blessings and your reasons for, seeing that as important matter in some meaningful way in the universe, then all providence moves.
Yeah,
right?
The universe conspires, I always tell people,
Exactly. The older I get, I'm 62 now, and the more I begin to think about what's important, the material, the things that I used to find were important to me, early on in my career, have really diminished. It's really being focused on the mission, and then to measure my success daily by how did I contribute to that. This, honestly, was something I thought about in that context, kind of like, let's evaluate spending an hour and a half with Ryan Miller
Sure,
on a podcast.
Is it worth it or not?
Yeah.
We're going to find out.
Yeah, and I feel about it the same way that I feel about when we do programs for Denali. I know when I enter a room that, the normal curve is at work. That if I'm in a room of 25 people, 20% of them are going to be right on the edge of their seat. And God willing, I will deliver something that will change them in some meaningful way. And they're very receptive to that. The middle 60%, they could go either way, but, if I really focus and do the best I can, I'm likely going to get
Something.
Or they're going to take something away that even if in the moment didn't strike them, it percolates up, at some point afterwards. And then there's the 20% that, are just not interested for whatever reason. My proclivity when I first started doing this was to try to convert the non-believers, right?
Yeah.
And what I realized through the help of many people and, through time was that, time is something we have all there is of, but none of us have enough of. So if I'm focusing my valuable time on trying to convert the non-believers, I'm subordinating the time that I could be spending, frankly, with the top 20%, who are the ones that change the world. And I'm not blowing smoke, but when I spend time with Ryan Miller, I feel like top 20%, world-changing capability. And I'm sure your listeners, knowing you the way I know you, are people that want to be that, a change agent, learn something that's really important, that will help them do that. So when I think about it in that context,
that passes the
litmus test. Check the boxes.
What is first of all, thank you. You can tell. I think hopefully you can tell my body language. That is not comfortable to receive. I appreciate it, and I'm moving on.
Okay.
I think when you are working with leaders or focusing on that top 20%, we celebrate leaders and we teach our kids, like, you should be a leader, right? Maybe this is a weird question. Who shouldn't be a leader? Or how do you, are there folks how do you identify folks that maybe shouldn't be a leader, but man, they'd be a great number 2, great number 3? How do you start to think about that?
It speaks to aligning your behavior with what you're trying to contribute to, so that you're always doing what is aligned with what's important, because you never know who's watching. On the other side of that coin, I often get really discouraged and disappointed when I see somebody in a public sense that says some really compelling things and appears to present themselves in a certain light that really I find inspiring. And then I meet them, and I'm in a private setting.
And they let you down.
Yeah, they let me down. That misalignment is something that I think diminishes a person's leadership impact even more than if they, weren't on the stage, giving me some sense that, wow, this person is really special and compelling.
We were talking before we got started about this research that you were just telling me about on, and I'm going to screw up the term, but is it like emotionally based decision making, or
Yes.
Because to me that plays right into this. It's right, like I might have all the things in front of me, but boy, that authenticity or the feeling that I have, or maybe the state that I'm in, really can affect the way that I'm moving about in the world. Could you just recap that? Because I was super interested in that idea.
Yeah, this is science that has emerged that I'm really intrigued with. It's the science of measuring, assessing a person's emotional state. And, what we've come to learn is that, people actually act on their emotions. And that is a more accurate sort of depiction of, the why they act versus when we measure their cognitive brain work.
The facts and the reasoning, right?
The
So you're
reasoning,
saying or not your argument. The argument is that there's so much more of our decision making that's all subconscious.
Exactly. So when you think about things like engagement surveys, and particularly in today's hybrid environment where people are remote, assessing how people are actually feeling in really important areas like safety, like authenticity, like autonomy, and things like that, recognition, purpose, success, really begins to give leaders a sense of, how people are likely to respond to a specific business imperative that's going to drive value for the company. If I'm feeling not safe for some reason, if I think my job is is in jeopardy for some reason, then I'm likely distracted from
The mission.
The mission, right?
Let me ask you. So you had a lot of your career. You were, and I can't remember the title, but you were. I was going to say chief culture officer, but this didn't exist back then. Raymore and Flanagan.
Yeah, I was head of human resources.
Human resources.
We called it senior VP. Yeah.
Okay, and where I think. So for people that don't know, if you don't know what Raymore and Flanagan is, they're furniture, home furnishings, where it was funny to me when we first met, and you had told me that that was one of your roles in growing that company. I was like, how do you get people aligned around the mission of furniture? It's not a sexy mission, right? How did you think about that? Because I wouldn't know how to get people aligned around, this is the mission. We're gonna be the best furniture company in the world. Yeah.
Yeah, people don't respond to that.
Okay.
There's a lot of companies that have a vision statement or a mission statement that says we will be the best.
Yeah.
Blah blah blah. I found that doesn't move people to act. Okay. So going back to what I said earlier, Ryan, when we uncovered sort of what I'm calling the secret sauce, and it's a three-legged stool. The first ingredient of the secret sauce is helping people remember who they are and what's important to them and why. That was the first element of the Leadership Development Institute process. So potential leaders who have an interest in leadership, that's important because a lot of people are very comfortable being individual contributors
Yeah.
of excellence. And that's fine because companies need those folks. But people who aspire to lead need to understand that I need to take a step back and I need to remember who I am, what's important to me, and why. Okay, so that was the first step. The second step then is what I talked about in terms of helping people recognize that each of us is endowed with unique blessings that are our own. And when we identify what those blessings are and can speak to them and are committed to developing them into strengths, and then we aim those strengths at what matters to us, this is where the energy starts to really, vibrate. The third element is when you attach those two things to your organization and its purpose, and it is a purpose that sort of resonates with your meaningful soul. Now that's when energy is exploding. You asked the right question. Well, you guys are in furniture retail. Here was the brilliance of what we figured out. Our closing percentage as a company, at the time I think we had like 98 stores. Our closing percentage was like 32%.
A third of people that walked in walked out.
Correct.
With a sale, right?
With a sale, right. Two didn't. And we would always sit around as business people and say, man, if we could, at the time we were like 500, 600 million in sales. If we could increase that closing percentage like 1%, I mean, that translates into
millions of dollars.
Yeah, millions of dollars to the bottom line. So it's like, what do we need to do? So we started to really think about that in a very specific way, and we said, no one wakes up on a Saturday morning and says, you know what, I got nothing to do today. I think I'm going to walk through a furniture store. Nobody does that, right? Anybody who walks through a furniture store door has a need.
There's intent.
Right? Maybe they woke up, their back's sore, like, I'm sick of this mattress, I need a new mattress. Or they bought a new house, all excited, I'm going to, outfit the house. Or they renovated a room, or they have a baby coming, and something
There's
has
a
happened.
life moment.
It's a life moment.
Yeah.
Exactly. So we started to translate that into a purpose. We said, when anybody walks through our door, we have the opportunity to raise their quality of life. How important is that to you? Mr. Delivery Driver, you're the last person that has the opportunity to bring joy to that person and a higher quality of life. If you walk into their house with muddy shoes, if you bang the wall as you're going up, to put some furniture into one of the rooms, you're diminishing their joy and their quality of life. The better that we do what we do, the higher the joy that we're creating for people.
Yeah, creating delight.
Delight. And people started to realize, you know what? That is true. I have the ability to raise the quality of life for another human being. That matters.
And that's outside of whatever. You can apply that to whatever.
You can.
Right?
It's exactly
that's the thing. I try to, when I'm working with entrepreneurs, I try to think about that. Airbnb does a great they have this like 10, we've talked about this, like this 10-star experience thing that I've been robbing, right? But the whole idea is each one of these touch points has the opportunity to raise the quality of life, create delight. I love how you're approaching that because it's not approaching it from the negative, like don't do these things. It's like we have the opportunity to do these things, right? And especially I think in an industry, I'll use furniture as an example because it's not something I know very well, but or I'll think cars, right? Like I think in many cases the quality of care or the continuity of care is so low that all you got to be is okay, and you're creating delight, right? So then it begs the question, like, what if you created delight on the delivery truck? Because that's a completely unexpected place for delight to happen. Yeah. I get it. That's awesome.
Yeah, and when it's communicated properly, and when you understand another person's nexus of those three circles, their why, and you communicate it in a way that they understand how that connects to their why, now you've got a fighting chance.
But that's also, I think, that simple idea or that simple flip also makes me feel better about being part of a team, right? Part of an organization where you're right, that the mission is not furniture. The mission is we're going to delight people. We just happen to do it through the value creation that we're doing through this business.
Exactly.
That's really interesting.
And it unifies the team around this concept that we're creating a higher quality of life. Mm-hmm. That's what we're doing. And how much do you want to do that? As much as I possibly can, right? I mean, that's motivating.
And everybody's got a role to play. Everybody's got a role to play in that, right?
in human resources, I was in charge of the human resource team. They'd say, Dave, because our primary moniker was enhance the customer shopping experience. Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. And my human resource team, we had about 20 people, and they were spread throughout the regions. And they'd say, Dave, we don't deliver any furniture. We don't sell any furniture. How are we going to enhance the customer shopping experience? I went back to Covey, and I thought about this. The people that are our production capability at the point of contact, they're the ones that have the most direct impact on the customer shopping experience. If they're distracted in some important way, if one of their children is sick and the health benefits isn't working and they've got to make calls and they can't figure out what's going on, or their paycheck was wrong and something isn't right and their bank account's short and they're trying to feed their family or do whatever they need to do with those funds. If we are not removing all of the potential distractions of our production capability, then we are not impacting the customer shopping experience through and with our production capability. They got that. Our job is to remove obstacles so that Ryan Miller, when he's doing his job front-facing and the customer every day, he's not worried about anything other than how am I going to make this person satisfied?
Okay. I am really digging this thread here because, but it makes me think, okay, what I hear you getting at is if we're successful at doing that, we will create more value, which will create more sales, which will create more bottom line, right? The flywheel starts to spin.
Right.
And that is a different school of thought where I think many workers, employees feel like their job is about value extraction. How much value is the employer able to squeeze out of them? But I love this approach of, okay, how do we remove obstacles? Like that's to me, that seems like a fundamentally different way of running a business. So I guess where I would ask you to elaborate on that a little bit is okay, so do you think that this works for everybody? What happens if you zoom out? I mean, you're just kind of doing this thought experiment. Like, what if that was the center of how business was done? And I guess this maybe brings back to, your role in Little Falls. You're a giant proponent of your community. It's asking this question, like, what if, this area was the place where we focused on employment as a function of removing barriers rather than, I don't know, value extraction or sales?
Yeah. I mean, listen, no judgment, right? People can choose to hold up as their why, whatever it is they choose to hold up. Listen, I've coached people all over the world, Ryan, and a lot of people that I've coached, their strongest why is to either attain a higher level of authority and power, mm-hmm. To create more wealth for themselves, mm-hmm. To be regarded in a way that, feeds their ego in some important way to them. There's all kinds of reasons why people choose to behave and do what they do with the expectation of some return on that investment mm-hmm. that is in areas that are important to them. I've learned I can't judge, and I won't. But I left Raymore and Flanagan after 9.5 years because I knew we had lightning in a bottle. And I thought exactly kind of what you're, sort of challenging me to express. Does this thing have transferability, right?
Yeah.
It's one thing to make, owners of a furniture retail company much more wealthy.
And it's still a big organization, what you were dealing with, right? But
Yeah. I mean, they're $2 billion in sales now, so they've been very successful, and rightly so. And in light of their success, they've helped a lot of people, not only their customers, obviously, with the quality of life thing, but a lot of the employees that I know and love dearly are, much better people and much better off, in ways that are important to them than they might have otherwise been. So that it's good. But I took the concept, the lightning in the bottle, to the next business that I participated in, Bates Communications out of Boston, with the idea to test whether this had transferability in the world, honestly. And there, our target audience was Fortune 50 companies and the executive leaders within those companies. And so I brought it into that context through executive coaching, through some of our programmatic work, globally. The UAE, South America, Mexico, Europe, Africa, all over the world. And one of the things that I realized is it absolutely has transferability. And secondly, the thing I realized was that Central New York is different than the rest of the world. I mean, that was an unintended consequence. And how is it different? It really emphasized, for me, that whatever it is that was special about growing up here and being part of a community here, I don't see that, in other places in ways that, I've come to remember and respect. The world's changing. Africa actually has, a real dedication and commitment to family and community and the kinds of things that, I think are really important. I remember, having a dinner there in Kenya with the CNN correspondent for Africa. And he liked to smoke cigars, and I like to smoke cigars. So after dinner, he said, let's go have a cigar and talk. So we did. And, during the dinner, or the cigar after dinner, he told me, he says, we're an emerging culture, and we love America. And I said, great, why? And he said, because we learn from Americans. He said, you guys have the best financial system in the world. And, we're trying to replicate it, and we're learning from you. And it's important that we do. And I was great. I could started to puff up, and he says, and you guys have the best military in the world. And, we would really love to have a stronger military. So we're trying to learn from you what we can. I'm thinking, yeah, we're pretty good militarily. And then he said something really important. He said, you have the best educational institutions in the world. If people here show some intellectual superior qualities, we tend to
that's where they go.
That's where they go. I lived in Boston. I said, it was like the epicenter of the universe for, colleges, 88 colleges at the time. So I was really happy. Then he said something that really sort of made me concerned. He said, we're going to leapfrog America. And, my competitive side kind of was aroused. And I said, really? I said, well, how's that going to happen? He said, well, let me ask you a question. He said, when are your parents still alive, Dave? And they were at the time. They were in their 80s. I said, yeah, they are. And he said, did they live with you, or did they live in the same community? I said, they used to. I said, not in the same community, not with me. I said, but now they're in in Valley Health Services. They're in a extended care facility. Okay. He says, during your holidays, do you have a family dinner? I said, oh yeah, absolutely. He says, do you bring your parents out of the facility? I said, yeah. He said, great. He says, and when you eat dinner, who eats first? And I said, well, the kids. We try to accommodate them, right?
Yeah.
He says, yeah. And he said, and then when dinner's over, what do you do with your parents? I said, well, they're usually tired. We bring them back to the facility. He said, here, he said, the elders are the most respected people in the family. He says they live in the most high quality part of the house. It's usually the highest level of the house. He says when we eat dinner, they eat first. And when they're settled and comfortable, then, the rest of us kind of file in and eat. He said after dinner, we sit around them and we ask them questions and we learn from their wisdom. And then when they're tired, we bring them up to their room and we make sure that they're comfortable. And he said, in America, you guys have forgotten the importance of neighborhoods, community, quality family life. And he said, we're going to learn all the things you're better, and we're going to keep that because we'll never give up on that. And I put out my cigar, and I went to bed, and I thought, this was a moment in time, Ryan, for me when I really committed to coming back to upstate New York and trying to recreate in a contemporary way the communities that I know existed here, that my wife and I married my high school sweetheart, we grew up in, and I know you well enough to know you did too. And there's something about that is really important and is missing. And I need to apply what I've learned about leader development to leaders in our area that can contribute to recreating a community that creates people like you and our children and our children's children for generations to come. And I am committed to that until the day I die.
I want to end there, but I want to ask you one more question.
Okay.
That is such a great place to. There's just one thing that I missed in this conversation. I'm like, I want to go back to it, but that's where that's going to end because that is really profound. So I'm sorry to take a U-turn.
No, that's fine.
I guess there's three short questions. So full disclosure, one of the ways that I know you is we've worked together in a leadership development capacity, and one of the things amongst many that was incredibly useful to me is I can't remember you've got the term for it, but it was like a 360 audit of my life,
yeah.
Right? And so you had asked me for probably a dozen or so stakeholders, right? So stakeholders.
Stakeholder interviews, I call it.
Okay, yeah.
360 kind of.
Yeah, it sounds a little corporate.
Yeah,
but you asked for the names of all these people, whether it was past clients or employers, my wife, and you went and talked to them about what kind of person is this person, and then you delivered this aggregated result of the blind spots and the strengths, and kind of helped me to understand where are those blind spots, where are those strengths, and is it tracking with kind of where I'm going? That was honestly one of the most useful things that I've experienced in my professional career, and I think that everybody should attempt that in some capacity. So I guess why do you do that, and where does that fit into someone's leadership development?
Leadership is influence. You said to me earlier on in this conversation that everybody could be a leader if you define it that way. And there's this ongoing debate, Ryan: are leaders born or are they created?
Made? Yeah.
I've come to believe we all have the capability and the responsibility to be our best leaders selves, because we all have influence over another human being, whether we want to or not. Even the quiet leaders who are individual contributors. When you work in teams and you have expertise that the team needs, you have to exhibit leadership qualities. So in going back to assessment science, there's a couple of categories of assessments. One is called nomothetic, think normal curve, And that's when an assessment sort of, you take yourself and it puts you in some sort of category, right? Myers-Briggs, ENTJ, right? Whatever that is.
Yeah.
Then there's a category of assessments called idiographic. And that's where the 360 comes in.
Okay.
It measures not only your assessment of yourself in critical areas, but in others' perception of yourself in those same critical areas. And what happens is typically there's a gap. There's a lot of alignment.
Yeah, there's a self-awareness component to this, right?
There's a self-awareness component. And there's a lot of alignment, right? I mean, if I talk to the right stakeholders, one of them was your wife.
Sure.
I mean, she knows you pretty well.
I would hope so. Yeah, I would hope so.
And she loves you.
Yeah.
And when I tell her, that I'm in this to help Ryan help himself because Ryan is interested in helping himself. Now they get really engaged. Yeah. Willing the good of another, right? That's love. And so they start telling me, here's, where he is really strong. And I look at, where you think you're really strong and generally aligns. Here's where I worry about him. And here's why. And here's where I think he could be a little bit more thoughtful about helping himself become a better leader. And then I look at you and you're like, I got that nailed. Oh, there's a gap. Because when the gap happens, now that's where you can focus your gaze and say, why is that person who I love and interact with and have to influence in some ways misperceiving how I perceive myself? There's some action or there's something happening that I'm doing that creates that misperception. Or maybe I'm misperceiving myself.
Right.
Maybe I am fooling myself. And I think I'm that. Because if you don't get that other point of view, then really are you improving as a leader? Because leader is influence. Leadership is influence. You're influencing other people. In organizations today, what's really interesting is it's become really complex, right? Leaders who are responsible for a certain element of the business now not only have to influence the people that are sort of in the same building with them, but these are people at home now that report into them. Plus, large organizations have to do that globally. Where time differences come into play and other things. It's really, really complex. So you really have to be aware of how other people whom you try to influence in a positive way are perceiving you're doing that.
It was such an interesting process. The last question I want to ask you is just from the book, and I will let it rest here, which is so in the book you've got this quote where it's you understand who you are and what's important, or when you understand who you are and what's important, then you have to go after it. So the question is how. And so what I want to ask you is, for people that are grappling with this, where do if I'm not in a situation where I can be coached by David Casullo or I can work with Denali Partners, how do I get started? What's a thing that someone can do today, tomorrow, to take that step of trying to figure out, okay, well, how do I do this?
Yeah, that's a good question. The way that you actually brought it up reminds me, I mentioned my parents were in a nursing home. And I remember reflecting when they were near the end on the fact that whatever they did or didn't do, it's all over now. They're really not in a position to do anything more about it. And so that's how they are defined. Whatever it is that when they were physically and mentally able to do, they did. The behaviors they exhibited in front of me as a kid, whatever it was, it's done. And so I think the first step to doing something about it is realizing that if you don't, then your legacy is going to be whatever it is, and it's going to be suboptimal. Because there's ways that each of us can improve. And the last thing I think we want in life is regrets on our deathbed, like Tamiano. however, he assessed that right or wrongly, he had some regrets. So I think the first step, Ryan, is to commit to becoming better, which is what you did when you sought me out. That's the first step. Because if you're not really committed, it's like going to the gym or losing weight or anything else. If you're not really committed, figure out why. Because you're not going to get better. You're not going to make a difference until and unless you understand why you want to be better. That's the first step. And that can happen through a lot of things. I think having an honest conversation with somebody you respect that, may have an opinion. My business partner, Neil, is probably, could identify as my coach, and I have him daily.
Yeah, sure.
And anytime I feel like I'm falling short or missing an opportunity to do something, I ask him, what are you seeing? What are you perceiving? And he'll tell me. And he'll tell me truthfully, and often it's biting. It hurts. And I need to do something about it. So I think self-efficacy is important, and there's a lot of ways to get that. I don't want to be self-promoting in terms of my book, but
this is the time to do it. Do it. Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah, the first two and probably the third chapter of the book come with exercises at the end that are meant to help you decide what is really important to you, to really begin that self-reflection, that metacognition, to remember who you are, and to then recommit to doing what you can to be that best self. And that's really important. And then the second thing is, you can take Clifton Strengths. It's available online. I highly recommend it. 30 years of science. It's very empirically valid, no doubt about it. And it'll give you a sense of, what your blessings are. And when you read it in the context of, how they feed back clarity around your blessings, it's interesting because the mix of your top 5 strengths contribute to how they articulate each one of them. And the top 5 strengths in the order that you will receive them is so unique to you that their science over 30 years has revealed that the probability of someone else in the world having those top 5 strengths in that order is 1 in 33 million.
Wow.
Yeah. So you're unique, and you need to figure out why and do it. And then attach that uniqueness to the who that you are and want to be better at. That's the start. And if you're on the right path, the universe will get behind you.
The universe will conspire.
That's right.
Well, this is awesome. Thank you. I appreciate the time and all the time that you do give me. You've given me a ton of opportunity, and I highly value your time and respect the hell out of you, Dave. Thank you.
That's mutual. Thank you. Appreciate it. And to your listeners, thank you.
Oh, where can they find more of you? The book is Leading the High Energy Culture. Amazon? Yep. Where do you get that?
Yeah, it's on Amazon. Yep, still there.
DenaliPartners.com. I'll link everything up.
Yep, DenaliPartners.com. And Rock City Development, is also on the web, and that's our development company.
What about your TikTok account? You have a great TikTok account.
I do?
No, I'm messing with you.
I didn't know that.
Thanks a lot.